So good afternoon. Welcome to World Press Freedom Day, an event which your Youngstown Press Club is proud to host. I'm Lori Factor, board chair of the Youngstown Press Club. World Press Freedom Day is about honoring the men and women who gave their lives working to educate and inform the public. Nearly 100 journalists in the past year alone. What other private profession has given so dearly? Imagine going to work every day and hoping you make it home alive. World Press Freedom Day is also about reminding the public of the critical role that journalism plays in a democratic society. The business of journalism has been challenged in recent years, but journalism's core mission has never been more important. The role of journalism is first and foremost to inform and educate the public, hold power accountable, and finally to amplify marginalized voices so that they too can be heard. This event is about honoring those who have given the ultimate sacrifice of their lives in the pursuit of their craft and ensuring that a free press exists and exists robustly. Let me say that again, and exists robustly. But we can't forget that we have colleagues who are detained while performing their duties. We are ever hopeful that Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who has been wrongfully detained in a Russian prison for over a year, will be released soon. It goes without saying that your Youngstown Press Club continues to stand with Evan. I'd like to thank WFMJ weekend anchor Chris Sarinelli for sharing this event. His suggestion of holding the reading of the names in the poignancy of our beautiful Mahoning County Courthouse is really perfect. We're happy to welcome Judge Theresa Dellick to offer some remarks. Since 2001, Judge Dellick has served as judge of the Mahoning County Juvenile Court, overseeing the administration of the court as well as the detention center and all of its services. Her administration of the court has been directed to balanced and restorative justice with focused attention. No, I shouldn't read this? Okay, well, without further ado, we will welcome Her Honor, Judge Dellick.
I think with all the press about me and my family, you all know a lot of stuff. Anyways, thank you, Lori. Thank you to the Youngstown Press Club for having me here today. I'm honored to be a part of this. It's quite a day of celebration and memorialization of those who serve across the globe. We celebrate the 31st anniversary of World Press Day, and as a person who has been the recipient both good and bad press, and I would have to say inaccurate press, I stand with you to celebrate because we need press and free press. So, and I do know you all know who you are. So anyways, I believe this is an important day, and today we extend our gratitude and appreciation to each of you across the globe who do this very difficult job. Maybe here it's not so difficult, but I think now we're seeing even in America it has become more difficult. We've watched it across the globe, and I think even here, even locally, nationally, state, it's becoming a different world. So we extend our gratitude and appreciation to each of you in this field, the media workers, the reporters, the journalists, those behind the scenes. Each and every one of you play an important role in making sure positive press and the truth is given. Today we remember those journalists who suffered in one way or the other by trying to report the truth. Each day we face misinformation, propaganda, clickbait, and disinformation more than ever in this digital world. We see where countries are trying to get information to us that's false, and how it's affected us, even in our own nation. And misinformation and propaganda spreads more rapidly than wildfire, as we all know, and trying to disprove it and reveal the truth is very difficult. It is important that journalists are held to a high standard of integrity. I believe our local staffs and local reporters do a very fine job. It is important that the press be used not as a political tool or as a way to make money or grab power. When that occurs, public trust is eroded and apathy will ensue. The truth becomes blurred and people stop caring. When people stop caring, democracy fails. So free press must be able to publish the fact without opinion, without bias, and without fear of reprisal. True free press educates by exposing the truth. And our own First Amendment, and it's not first for any reason other than the importance of it and the importance that our forefathers saw, guarantees this right to free speech that's guaranteed to you as reporters. Yet so many countries and governments across the globe silence their reporters. Their citizenry only know one side, the government's side, the ruling power's rhetoric. They are prevented from forming their own opinions or learning the truth. These countries become autocratic, dictatorial, and the public suffers. Democracy dies. Yet democracy thrives on free speech and independent press. Censorship, lawsuits, threats, harassment, information repression, intimidation, jail, physical injury, and even death is aimed and are aimed at those who work in the journalism field. They face danger in preserving the very truth that they want to expose to the public, the very truth that we take for granted in our own country. So we need to stand tall against these threats. We need to stand together. For if not, in the long run, we too will suffer. A free and open press ensures that all sides are heard, not just one. It ensures that governments do not operate in the dark. And it ensures that democracy will long reign. So thank you, and thank you for holding this today and remembering these. Lori Factor and I spoke earlier, and we know there are 99 journalists whose names we're going to mention today, and that's only in 1 year. So if we were to sit here and do 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, how many names would that be? And how many of those should never be forgotten because they tried to uphold their belief in their truth? So today I will read a few names myself. From Afghanistan, Hossein Naderi, a journalist with the Independent Afghan Voice Agency, killed at a cultural center in a province in Afghanistan while reporters had gathered to mark National Journalists' Day. Think about that. We're here today. I don't think any of us fear that. And for our reporters to fear that is sad. In Albania, Pau Kola, a security guard for the station Top Channel, fatally shot by unidentified people firing about 25 shots from a vehicle as they passed by Top Channel's headquarters. In Bangladesh, Gholam Rabeni Nabeen, a correspondent for the privately owned news website Bangla News 24 and broadcaster Ekator TV, and vice president of the Jamalpur District Online Journalists Association. He was ambushed and beaten by a group while he was traveling home on his motorcycle. He died a day later. In Cameroon, Jean-Jacques Ola Bibi, a radio presenter and commentator, found dead with bullet wounds near his home in a suburb of the Cameroon capital. And finally, from Cameroon, Martina Sogo, a broadcast reporter and managing director of the privately owned Cameroonian radio broadcaster Amplitude FM, killed by 4 hooded men. His body was later found naked and dumped in an empty plot of land. He had been tortured and mutilated. Thank you.
From Colombia, Luis Gabriel Pereira, founder of the local news outlets Notiorense, which publishes stories on crime and public security in Ciénaga de Oro. He was fatally shot by 2 gunmen aboard a motorcycle. From Haiti, Dumeski Kirsant, Haitian journalist who reported on issues such as gang activity for the online media outlet Radio Tele Indurep. He was shot and killed by attackers in a suburb of the capital city of Port-au-Prince. From Honduras, Francisco Javier Ramirez, television journalist, shot and killed in southwestern Honduras while with police protection. India, Shashikant Warashe, reporter for a Marathi language local newspaper Mahanagari, hit by an SUV allegedly driven by a land dealer who was the subject of Warishe's ongoing investigative news reports. He died the next day.
from Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Abdullah Elwan, Palestinian media worker and voiceover specialist who contributed to multiple media outlets. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike on his home. Abdelhim Awad, Palestinian media worker and driver, was killed in a strike on his home in the Gaza Strip. Abdulhadi Habib, Palestinian journalist who worked for the Al-Manar news agency, HQ Media, and for UNRWA TV, which is part of the United Nations agency that supports Palestinian refugees. He was killed along with several of his family members in an Israeli airstrike on a residential apartment south of Gaza City. Abdullah Darwish, Palestinian cameraman for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip. Adel Zarob, Palestinian freelance journalist, killed along with 25 family members in an Israeli airstrike on their home in Rafah, southern Gaza. Adham Hassouna, Palestinian freelance journalist and media professor at Gaza and Al-Aqsa universities, killed along with several members of his family in an Israeli airstrike in the city of Gaza.
These journalists are from Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Ahmad Jamal al-Madhoun. He was a Palestinian journalist and a deputy director of a government-owned local newspaper at Al-Mahoun. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike on northern Gaza. Ahmed Abu Mahdi, a TV journalist for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip. Ahmed El-Qura, photojournalist who worked at Al-Aqsa University and was also a freelancer. He was killed in a strike in occupied Palestinian territory. Ahmed Fatima, he was a photographer for an Egypt-based TV station and Palestinian media worker, killed in a strike in Gaza. Ahmed Karadine, a Palestinian journalist and a camera operator. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike on his family home in northern Gaza, along with 12 family members. And Ahmed Shihab, a Palestinian radio journalist, killed along with his wife and 3 children in an Israeli airstrike on his house in the northern Gaza Strip.
Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Amro Salah Abu Hava, Palestinian media worker, killed in a strike in Gaza. Assad Shamlak, freelance Palestinian journalist, killed along with 9 members of his family in an Israeli airstrike on their home in their southern Gaza neighborhood. Asim al-Barash, radio sound engineer, shot dead by an Israeli sniper fire when he was on his way home north of Gaza City. Asim Kamal Musa, Palestinian journalist who produced visual and written news reports, killed in an Israeli airstrike in southern Gaza. Ayat Hadora, Palestinian freelance journalist and podcast presenter, killed along with an unknown number of family members in an Israeli airstrike on her home in northern Gaza. Bilal Yahadal, the director of a nonprofit that supports the development of independent Palestinian media, killed in his car in Gaza in an Israeli shelling.
These journalists also lost their lives in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Dua Jabor, a Palestinian freelance journalist who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on her home, along with her husband and children in southern Gaza. Dua Sharaf, Palestinian journalist and host for the Hamas-affiliated Radio Al-Aqsa, who was killed with her child in a strike on her home in the Yarmouk neighborhood in Gaza. Haneen Kashtem, Palestinian journalist who contributed to multiple media outlets, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on a refugee camp in northern Gaza, along with other family members. Hassan Farajala, TV journalist who held a senior position in the Hamas-affiliated Al-Quds TV, who was killed in an Israeli bombardment in the Gaza Strip. Hasuna Salim, a Palestinian freelance journalist who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on a refugee camp in central Gaza, along with his colleague and friend, Sari Mansour. Hisham Al-Nawaha, Palestinian reporter for the Kabar news agency, who was killed when an Israeli warplane struck an area housing several media outlets in western Gaza.
These 6 journalists also perished in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Hussam Mubarak, a radio journalist, killed in an Israeli airstrike in the northern Gaza Strip. Ibrahim Marswouk, a Palestinian media worker, killed along with his family in an Israeli airstrike on his home in a Gaza City neighborhood. Ibrahim Mohammed Lafi, a photographer for Anin Media, killed at the Gaza Strip's Erez crossing into Israel. Ahmed Al-Walhed, a media worker and administrator, killed with his family members in an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip. Issam Abdullah, a video journalist for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV, died near a southern Lebanese village when 2 shells fired from Israel killed him and injured 6 other journalists. Issam Bar, a journalist for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV, killed in an Israeli airstrike in the northern Gaza Strip.
The lives of these journalists also were lost in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Iyad Matar, journalist working for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV, killed along with his mother in an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip. Iyabra Abu Hadras, Palestinian journalist and a reporter for the Hamas-affiliated Quds Al-Yum broadcast, killed in an Israeli airstrike on his home in northern Gaza, along with 7 members of his family. Iyamul al-Faqawi, Palestinian journalist for the Islamic Jihad-affiliated Mitaq Media Foundation, killed in an Israeli airstrike on his home in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza. Iyamal Mohammed Haniyah, a radio engineer and reporter for the sports news website Wajah, killed along with other family members in an Israeli airstrike on his home in Gaza City. Khalil Abu Atra, videographer for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV, killed along with his brother in an Israeli airstrike in the southern Gaza Strip. Majid Fadal al-Randis, a member of the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate who worked for the news website Al-Jamahir, killed in an Israeli airstrike in the Nasirat refugee camp in Gaza Strip.
These journalists were also killed in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Majid Kashko, a media worker and the office director of the Palestinian Authority-run Palestine TV channel, killed with members of his family in an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip. Mohammed al-Bari, Palestinian journalist with the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV channel, killed in an Israeli airstrike on Gaza City. Mohammed al-Auf, Palestinian journalist and photographer for the Hamas government-owned local newspaper and news agency Al-Ray, killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza City along with an unspecified number of family members. Excuse me. Mohammed Abu Hasira, journalist for the Palestinian Authority-run Wafa news agency, killed in an airstrike on his home in Gaza along with 42 family members. Mohammed al-Jaja, media worker and organizational development consultant at Press Has Palestine, which owns Sawa news agency in Gaza and promotes press freedom and independent media, killed in a strike on his home along with his wife and 2 daughters in northern Gaza. Mohammed Asay Tan-Aya, Palestinian media worker and sound engineer for the Hamas government-owned local radio Al-Ray, killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza City, along with unspecified number of family members, including his father.
Also from Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, Mohammed Fayez Abu Matar, a freelance Palestinian photojournalist, killed during an Israeli airstrike in the southern Gaza Strip. Mohammed Haliba, media worker and director at the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TSV channel, killed in an Israeli airstrike on his home in Nuseirat camp in central Gaza, along with his wife and 3 of his children. Mohammed Muin Ayas, Palestinian journalist and a freelance photographer, killed in an Israeli airstrike on his home in Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza, along with 20 members of his family. Mohammed Nabil Al-Zak, Palestinian journalist and a social media manager for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Quds TV, killed in an Israeli airstrike in northern Gaza. Mohammed Nasser Abu Hawaidi, Palestinian journalist working for the privately owned Al-Istiqlal newspaper, killed in an Israeli airstrike in northern Gaza while covering the aftermath of the airstrikes. Mohammed Balousa, Palestinian journalist and the administrative and financial manager of the Gaza office at the local news TV channel Palestine Today, killed in an Israeli airstrike in northern Gaza. Mohammed Jargon, journalist with Smart Media, shot while reporting on the conflict in an area to the east of Rafah City in the southern Gaza Strip. Mohammed Abu Hatab, a journalist and correspondent for the Palestinian Authority-funded broadcaster Palestine TV, killed along with 11 members of his family in an Israeli airstrike on their home in the southern Gaza Strip. Mohammed al-Salhi, photojournalist working for the 4th Authority news agency, shot dead near a Palestinian refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip.
These journalists were also killed in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Muhammad Ali, Palestinian journalist from El Shabab Radio, a youth radio station, killed in an Israeli airstrike in the northern Gaza Strip. Mohammed Imad Labad, journalist for the Al Resala news website, killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza City. Mohammed Saab, Palestinian photographer from the Kabar news agency, killed in an Israeli airstrike on an area housing several media outlets in western Gaza. Montasur al-Sawaf, Palestinian cameraman for the Anadolu Agency, killed in Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. Mossab Ashur, Palestinian freelance photographer, killed during an attack on the Nusayrat refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. Mustafa Bakir, Palestinian journalist and camera operator for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV, killed in an Israeli airstrike in southern Gaza. Mustafa El-Sawaf, Palestinian writer and analyst for the news website MSDR News, killed in an Israeli airstrike on his home in Gaza City. Nazmi Al-Nadim, Deputy Director of Finance and Administration for Palestinian TV, killed with members of his family in a strike on his home near eastern Gaza. And Ola Atala, Palestinian female freelance journalist who contributed to multiple media outlets. She was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the house in which she and her family were taking refuge in the El Daraj area of Gaza City. She was killed with 9 members of her family, including her brother and her uncles.
Also from Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Roe Aidan, Israeli journalist, camera operator, and photographer for Inet, shot dead while holding his 3-year-old daughter outside his home just after his wife was shot and killed. Aidan's daughter was kidnapped and taken to Gaza as one of about 240 Israeli hostages. Roshdi Soro, Palestinian photojournalist and co-founder of Ayan Media, killed in an airstrike by the Israelis in the Gaza Strip. Soro's wife and toddler daughter were injured in the same strike. Said El-Halabi, journalist for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV, killed in an Israeli airstrike in the Jabalia refugee camp in the northern Gaza Strip. Saeed Al-Tawil, Palestinian journalist and editor-in-chief of the Al-Kamsa News website, killed when Israeli warplanes struck an area housing several media outlets in the Rimal district in western Gaza. Salam Mima, Palestinian journalist and head of the Women Journalists Committee at the Palestinian Media Assembly, killed after sustaining injuries when her home in the Jabalia refugee camp in the northern Gaza Strip was hit by an Israeli airstrike.
Well, the names I'll be reading were also killed in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. When I look out, it's important, I believe, to point out that it's quite easy for this time next year for everybody here to be an enemy of the state, to be accused of treason. I can't tell you how proud I am of all of you who every day, in the words of Patrick Henry, say, if this be treason, make the most of it. Killed Salma McCamer, freelance journalist, killed alongside her child in an Israeli airstrike in Rafah City in the southern Gaza Strip. Sami Al-Nadi, journalist and director for the Hamas-affiliated Al-Aqsa TV, killed in an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip. Samir Abu Daqqa, Palestinian journalist, cameraman, and editor for the Qatari-based broadcaster Al Jazeera Arabic, killed in an Israeli drone strike in Khan Yunis of Gaza. Sari Mansour, director of the Quds News Network, killed in an Israeli airstrike on the Barouji refugee camp in central Gaza. And Shami El-Ghazair, Palestinian journalist for Al Majed Network, killed alongside with her family members in an Israeli airstrike on Rafah City in the southern Gaza Strip.
Old editorial writers always have to editorialize. I can tell you the first journalist I knew of who died in doing his job was Ernie Powell, who was killed by a sniper in the waning days of World War II. And among my mother's books that she read while my dad was in China was Here Is Your War by Ernie Powell, which he wrote in 1943. The names that we're reading today, most of us had to look up on various apps to get the pronunciations. That doesn't change the fact that their sacrifice, their loss, was every bit as much, and perhaps more sometimes, the names that we recognize, like Ernie Powell. Pyle, sorry, should have looked that one up. These two are 5 names from the Israeli and occupied Palestinian territory. Yaqub Al-Barsh, executive director of Namai Radio, killed in an Israeli airstrike on his home in northern Gaza. Yahya Mani, journalist with the Abbas-affiliated Al-Aqsa radio channel, killed in a strike in the Gaza Strip. Yaniv Zohar, Israeli photographer and cameraman working for the Hebrew language daily newspaper Israel Hayom, killed during the October 7 Hamas attack on Kibbutz Nahal Oz in southern Israel. Yasser Abu Nemas, Palestinian journalist for Al Sahel media organization, killed in a strike on his family home in Khan Yunis, Gaza. Yosef Meher Dawas, Palestinian journalist, contributing writer for Palestine Chronicle, and for We Are Not Numbers, a youth-led Palestinian nonprofit project, killed in an Israeli missile strike on his family's home in the northern town of Beit Nahai in the Gaza Strip.
I want to take a brief moment to thank Judge Dellick, Her Honor, for being a part of our event today, calling attention to the importance of journalism and the First Amendment in our democracy. As I'm sure all of you well know, democracy dies in darkness. And that's a reality that we are facing head on in this day and age. I also wanted to briefly thank Lori and Diane and Joanne for helping me put this all together, and to all of you for being here. From Lebanon, Farah Omar, a Lebanese correspondent of the Beirut-based Hezbollah-affiliated broadcaster Al Mayadeen TV, killed by an Israeli strike in South Lebanon. That same strike also killed her colleague, Rabi Al-Mamari, camera operator for Lebanon's Hezbollah-affiliated broadcaster Al Mayadeen TV, killed by an Israeli airstrike on Tar Harfa, South Lebanon. In Lesotho, Rala Canelo Yoki, broadcast reporter, internet reporter, and radio host with Chanelo FM, shot and killed by 2 attackers as he drove out of the station's premises in the Lesotho capital city of Masru. In Mexico, Jesus Gutierrez Vergara, founder and editor of a Facebook-based news website, killed by gunfire in Rio, Colorado, Mexico. And also in Mexico, Nelson Matus Peña, founder and editor of Lo Real de Guerrero, a news website that often covered crime, violence, and security issues in Acapulco, shot and killed by several unidentified attackers in a parking lot in Acapulco.
As we know, journalists are also slaughtered in other countries too, and here are some of the examples that I have here. First, from Mozambique, João Chamuse, a prominent newspaper editor and commentator, and co-owner and editor of Ponto por Ponto, meaning point by point, an online daily newspaper that covers corruption and current affairs. He was found dead of head wounds in the yard of his home near the capital of Mozambique. In Paraguay, Alexander Alvarez, a radio news producer for a local privately owned broadcaster, which was Radio Urunde, shot and killed by an attacker on a motorcycle while he was in his car in a city near Paraguay's border with Brazil. In the Philippines, Chris Bonduquin, journalist and radio broadcaster, shot and killed by two gunmen on a motorcycle in a Philippine province. Also in the Philippines, Juan Junalon, home-based radio station broadcaster, shot and killed during a live broadcast on Facebook in the Philippines. And in Rwanda, John Williams Netwali, editor of privately owned Chronicle newspaper and founder of a YouTube-based Pax TV Iremi News. He died in a traffic accident after surviving threats and other reportedly staged accidents.
From Somalia, Abdifada Moalim Noor, journalist and news anchor for Somali cable TV, killed in a suicide bomb attack at a restaurant in the Somali capital of Mogadishu. From the Sudan, Halima Idris Salim, reporter for local independent online news outlet Sudan Bakra. Soldiers from a parliamentary group killed Salim when they ran her over and another person in Sudan while Salim was on assignment. From the Ukraine, Armand Soldin, Bosnian French video journalist working with a French news agency, killed in a rocket attack. Bohdan Bitik, Ukrainian television news producer, shot and killed on a bridge near the southern frontline Ukrainian city of Kherson. And finally, from the United States, Dylan Lyons, reporter for Spectrum News 13 in Florida, shot and killed near Orlando while covering another fatal shooting.
Let's take a minute because it's heavy, right? We want to thank everybody for reading. We want to thank Judge Dellick for your insightful words. Thank you to the Mahoning County Courthouse for hosting us here because it's powerful. Thank you for attending today, helping us remember our fallen colleagues, and let's go back and into our lives and not forget them. Have a pleasant weekend, everyone.